before we leave Boyle Heights, when you was a kid, other than Mickey Cohen, because Mickey Cohen was we say he's organized crime. He's big time gangster. But were you aware of any like street level gangs at the time?
There was a fighter by the name of Don Jordan. Okay, he became the welterweight champion of the world. He beat Virgil Akins for the title, Honey Bear Akins. Don Jordan belonged to the Apaches, who was a Boyle Heights gang, out of Flats. That was out of First Street. His nickname was Geronimo because he was actually the leader of the Apaches, the gang, and he was the leader, so he was called Geronimo. Well, I never met him directly, but I knew of him, and I knew of the Apaches, which was a gang at that time in Boyle Heights. They were notorious, like I said. And then there was another gang called the Blue Diamonds, and that was a gang that tried to recruit me. They had white T-shirts with a little blue diamond on it, and you would buy a knife. It was a little blue knife. It was not a dagger or a switchblade, but it was a knife. Naturally, my mother, she objected to that. So the Blue Diamonds, I never became part of the gang.
And what was the racial makeup of the Apaches and the Blue Diamonds?
Apaches were 99.9% Chicano, Latino, but their leader, Don Jordan, was part black, okay, and part Indian, and he spoke fluent Spanish. And I ran into him later on in Compton. Way later on, he lived as a Kona Tiki, at the Tiki Inn on Compton Boulevard. This is after his fighting days, after he was retired, and he was a world champion now. He wasn't just a contender, he was a world champion. And I ran into him. He was working as a longshoreman in Long Beach.
And what was the racial makeup of the Blue Diamonds?
It was half and half then, half black, half Chicano.
Did you ever hear of were the Flats gangs out when you was a kid?
The Flats were notorious in the 40s, okay? When my mother grew up in Boyle Heights, also grew up on Glass Street. Her brothers were very, very familiar with the Flats. It was called T-Flats. And the reason they were called the Flats is that during the Russian Revolution, 1917, when the Bolsheviks took over Russia, there was the White Russians that left. The Red Russians took over. The White Russians that left settled in Boyle Heights. They settled in the area, and they used to live in these homes that had flat roofs. So they called the area Russian Flats. That's where the Flat Gang came in.
And by the time you were growing up in Boyle Heights, there weren't that many Russians, or were there some left?
Oh yeah, there was a segment of Russians still there. Not as many as before, right after they came over from there was a lot of Armenians there too.
Okay, so now your parents moved to 136 in Central. Why did they make the move, and what was your first reaction?
Okay, what happened is this. There was such a thing in those days as called covenants. In other words, if you were going to buy a home, you had to have European ancestry, not 50% or 75%, but 100%. Okay, my parents went to Downey at that time, 1951. My dad was a disabled veteran out of the Second World War, and they went to Downey to buy a home. Without telling them no, the developer said, well, the same home is being developed in Compton. It's Biltmore developers. You might be better off if you went to Compton. So without saying, no, you can't buy a home here in Downey in 1951, they referred them to the Compton area.
So that was a little bit of racial restrictive covenants you're talking
I would say it was because, it was the same housing developer, but they knew that Compton was being bought by black veterans. Now, it was open to veterans. Everybody that bought a home in Compton, where I grew up, Central Park, were veterans, black veterans. So they referred us to Compton because we weren't white enough to live in Downey.
And why do you think they didn't think he was white enough? What was it about your mom or your dad?
Well, my father was very European looking, green eyes, brown hair. My mother was very Latino looking, black hair and brown eyes. So I guess he just made it up in his mind that my mother didn't fit the program. That's what I figured.
Yeah.
I wasn't there. I probably would have been in that, not fit the program either.
Why do you say that?
Well, because I don't have brown hair and green eyes or blue eyes,
All right. So they get basically steered to Compton.
which is actually the blessing they gave me. I think every day the guy who refused, or not refused, but referred us to Compton, because it gave me the insight of growing up in a black community, being completely culturally involved with the black community, which really served me so much in the future. There's a story about that that will fit right into this conversation. That was a famous general, the last general of the Roman Empire. His name was Flavius Aetius. Flavius Aetius. And the reason that he's famous is because he defeated Attila the Hun, the scourge of Europe. You've heard of Attila the Hun. Everybody's
Yes.
heard of him, right? The only time he lost a battle was to Flavius Aetius. And do you know why he lost that battle? Because Flavius was a hostage in the Hun camp. He was actually held as a hostage with the Huns. He learned everything about them. He knew how to throw a javelin. He knew how to ride a horse. He knew their culture completely. So when he battled Attila the Hun in the Catalina Plains in 451 AD, he defeated Attila the Hun. The first time that Attila had ever lost a war. And why did he defeat him? He knew his culture. He knew everything about him. He had grown up with him. Why was I successful in Compton? I grew up in Compton. I grew up in a black neighborhood. There wasn't anything about going on in the culture of the black community that I didn't know about. That's all I knew.
Thanks for watching StreetTV.net. If you're not subscribed, please hit that button below and click the bell to receive alerts and notifications. Feel free to comment below so you can give us your feedback, and be sure to watch the 2 related episodes to the right. If you want to support this platform or follow us on social media, visit the links in the description, and thanks for watching StreetTV.net.